Hi, this is Al Filreis. Remember me? We're in Philadelphia at the Kelly Writers House at the University of Pennsylvania, and we have a special guest with us today for our live webcast, and I want to introduce her, or really just acknowledge her presence. We're so honored that she's here, and then I'm going to introduce some other characters in the room. So those of you who are around the world watching this, and I know that there's people in Italy, it's 1 a.m. in Italy. And the Italians were writing me earlier saying, what's the time difference? And I'm saying, we're 7 weeks into the course, and you're asking me what the time difference is? Anyway, happy Wednesday to the Italians. And of course, in Manila, where T is watching us, it is
just past midnight.
Midnight. But the next day or something. No, it's 12, right, midnight. Okay, I'm all confused. Anyway, to my right and your left is Bernadette Mayer. I want everybody around the world, and especially in the room here, to put your hands together to welcome her back to the Writers House. Hey, Bernadette is here. So this is very exciting for us. And Philip Good is here, and Bernadette and Philip are going to be giving a reading right here from this spot, although it'll be a podium a little more traditionally set up and not quite as many wires. And that is at 6 p.m. So I was wrong about the Italian time. That's 6 p.m. will be 1 a.m. Italian time. So it's 7 p.m. now. Sorry, I've got it all wrong. Anyway, at 6 p.m. Philadelphia time, we're going to have a reading. It's going to be great, and we will be webcasting it. This is going to be an hour and 10 minutes, or at this point, an hour and 5 minutes of completely open, free colloquy, questions, comments, praise, who knows what. And so we encourage people who are watching by webcast to call us at 215-573-9752, 215-573-9752. We encourage people who are here with us in the room to think about your comments or questions. So let me introduce people around. We also have the Twitter feed is #ModPo Live. Right? And we have a forum set up and a thread set up, Julia?
We do. So look for a discussion during and after the 1021 live webcast session.
And what's the thread called?
And it is called, you go to forums, go to live webcast sessions, and go to that discussion.
So we're going to have questions coming from all over the place. So let me introduce some friends, and then we'll get started. So first of all, here's the first call. Chris Martin is doing magic. And Zach Gardner is doing his magic, and Chris and Zach are behind the scenes. And we've had a lot of people say, why don't we see more of Chris and Zach? So there's Chris. Chris, wave. This is Chris Martin. He's amazing. Okay, we have, at a distance in their Google Hangout boxes, we have Molly O'Neill in Los Angeles. Hello, Molly.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well.
Great. And we have Amaris Kachansky, who is in some undisclosed location, maybe, I don't know, the farthest you can go in the United States? No. Or is she in Bucks County, or where are you, Maurice?
I'm in Massachusetts. Hi, Al.
You're in Massachusetts. Boy, oh boy, you get around. Okay, it's good to see you. And here, I've already introduced Bernadette. We have sitting to my far right, though she is far left of me, Erica Kaufman, who came all the way from the beautiful autumnal Hudson Valley to join us from Bard College. Erica, let's give it up for Erica. Yeah, she's here. And she said it's weird to be here because she's usually in one of those boxes, Bernadette. And we like her here. We like people in boxes, but we also like her here. And sitting to my left and your right is the amazing Julia Block, co-teacher, co-pal of mine. And thank you for sitting in. What, pal of mine?
Pal of mine.
Pal of mine. That's an old from the 40s, people say he's a pal of mine, but she's a pal of mine. Thank you for sitting in last week.
My pleasure.
That was great. Thank you so much.
It was a lot of fun.
Loved seeing all the praise of it. Okay, so we've got a phone call. I'm just going to warm us up because people have been talking about Bernadette Mayer in the forums, and I just thought I would read briefly a couple comments, and then that'll sort of put some love in the room, and everybody will be so happy to have Bernadette here that they're going to be fun. We have a lot of fun things to say. So one of them is Maria Arden, who had never read Bernadette's poems before. And she writes, I'm looking forward to the webcast tomorrow. Hello, Maria. I know you've joined us. As a mother of 2 little ones, 14 months and 5 years, and as an aspiring poet, The poem Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is a poem that we read, was both moving and inspiring. I was in tears while listening and reading. I often refer to my children as feral creatures. So the reference to the wild boy of Aveyron made complete sense, both the anxiety felt as a parent and the feeling that no matter what, life finds a way. That's so nice. And Mary McIntyre said in part that in that same poem, the poem turns with the seed pod on the floor by my desk. It's as if she says, Bernadette, give yourself a shake. Yeah. Perhaps her writing of letters is not letters in the traditional sense of newsy updates, but letters on the page that form a language for her situation, her poetry. It wakes me up, a phrase from the poem might refer to the cold air, but also to the awakening after seeing the seed pod. Its association with losing herself is what overcomes her stuck place. New mothers make lists, says Mary. Mayer's reading list reminds me of when my kids were infants. I started reading books in the library, starting with A, looking for order. I totally get Mayer in this poem. And Nathan Walker, I'll end with this. He has a long statement I'm only going to read a few lines from. He says, as far as I'm concerned, Bernadette Mayer is the poet laureate of the fulcrum days, the days of changes, the poet of the time slip, the time peak, the time recalled and brought forth and rearranged, time handled with care and revolved in hands and not hands, to be cherished, recorded, looked at. Midwinter Day is so ecstatically so one of my all-time favorite poems, and it has been my intention to have a routine every year where I could read Midwinter Day on Midwinter Day. And of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, that poem, he says, she thinks that in the movie, if you see a pod, it is time to die, but in the poem, if you see a seed pod, it is time to muse on mortality, on the slippage of time, on having the families and husbands and children getting older, and the flow of time and energy in and out of all this, and what our time and energy is put to. What an amazing autumnal poem. This, too, is one of my favorite Bernadette Mayer poems, which is saying so very much, because all of her poems are my favorite of her poems, but some are more favorite, and this one is in the very, very favorite category, Bernadette Mayer forever. Nathan. And can we put our hands together and agree with Nathan Walker? So that's the ModPo people's elaborate way of thanking you for coming. And before we take the phone call, I just wanted to, Zach, I'm holding up some books. So this book is relatively new? Yeah. So it's Uncle Andrew's Pile of Pads. I'm holding it. Am I holding it still? Okay. We have a couple copies here, I think, maybe not, but you should be able to find this easily. And then I'm very excited to hold up this new book of sonnets. All right, so you have to get the sonnets. And this is a book that is always within reach at my desk at home, the Bernadette Mayer Reader, which is actually goes back a few years. I want to say early 90s, Bernadette? Yeah. 91 maybe. And this is an indispensable book, Bernadette Mayer Reader. Okay, so let's take the call, Lily, and see what who's there.
Speaking of Nathan, it's Nathan.
It's Nathan Walker?
Yep.
Nathan. Okay, bring him up. Hello, Nathan.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. What I want you to do is turn your computer sound down so you can hear us only on the phone.
Right. The computer sound is off.
All right, great. So you're calling from Minnesota?
I am indeed. And I was so nervous to call in that I wrote something down, but I did edit it.
Well, so before you start reading that, would you say hello to Bernadette, your favorite poet? She's right here to my right. Can you see her?
Hi, Bernadette Mayer. This is Nathan Walker. Thank you so much for coming here today. I'm deeply honored to be able to talk to you.
So you can't see him, but you can only hear him. He's in Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
All right, Nathan.
Hi.
So you want to read something for Bernadette, to Bernadette, and we're listening.
Oh, all right. So I want you to know, Bernadette Mayer, that I am wearing a lemur T-shirt just for you.
Can you?
I don't know how I feel about that. Is there a lemur on it?
Yeah, there's a lemur on the front.
But it's not made of lemur
It's
fur.
a representation of a lemur.
Oh, okay.
Like the picture. And then on the back there's a lemur tail. But I wanted to tell you that you are not just one of my favorite poets, but you are to me a poetry hero. Your warmth of tone and clarity of vision suffuse everything you have written. Your poem showed me that consciousness could be a dialogue, that memory could be a collective action. Your poems were not afraid to operate on the level of the immediate self, but also to go beyond that self when necessary, to expand what a self was, what it could be, to include friends, lovers, children, a neighborhood, a city, a world. You did not just write about intersubjectivity, you practiced it. Midwinter Day showed me that everything I wanted a poem to do could be done, and everything I wanted a poem to be, it could be. It was cosmic and grounded, universal and particular, domestic and psychedelic, formally open, but uninsistent upon this fact. In this class, I was delighted to read Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a poem just as good at being autumnal as Midwinter Day is at being wintry. A few days ago, I began reading Poetry State Forest, which I am still reading, and whatever respect I have had for you and your work has multiplied 1,000-fold. And detail as practically and as straightforwardly as you can how you and your poetry have dealt with the aftermath of the stroke at 49. All of the preparation of all the years of you being Bernadette Meyer gave you the ability to write through, around, and along with its aftermath. Of all the gifts you've given me, this is the greatest. I am now 40 years old, and your work has helped me be at peace with the next 20, no matter what comes, because you have let me know that as long as I hold on to poetry, it will hold on to me. Thank you, Bernadette Meyer. Nathan Walker.
Whoa.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Nathan, stay on the line. I want to get some reactions to that. Let's go around the table here. Erica, what were you thinking of when Nathan was praising Bernadette?
I mean, that was just such a beautiful piece. I wrote down notes for me to think about. I love the way that you phrased consciousness could be a dialogue and something about the potential of memory to be collective action, both of which are things that I also really admire about Bernadette's work.
Can you say more about consciousness as a dialogue?
Well, I guess just looking at Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you're both inside of the consciousness of the speaker of the poem, but you're also participating and you feel as though you're having a conversation with the activities that are happening from line to line, even, including the reading of books and, the kids, and like you're part of the consciousness of the poem and engaging in a conversation with the poem itself.
Bernadette, did you want to react to Nathan's statement or to what Erica just said?
Yeah, I have an assignment for Nathan.
Oh, awesome.
You should find something that you think is completely impossible to write about and write about it.
I will absolutely do that.
Will you do that?
I think I already have, but yes, I will, absolutely.
That's great. Julia Block, what do you have to say about all this? This is what a start to the webcast.
Well, first of all, I'm supposed to introduce Phil and Bernadette this evening, but I think I'd like to ask Nathan to do it.
Nathan, can you get on a plane?
Because I'm still working on my introduction, and that was so much more beautiful than anything I think I could possibly come up with. But Nathan, I really love what you said about the self, and I think you were talking about the way there are kind of like plural selves in Bernadette's work, and that's something that I think about a lot with Bernadette, your approach to the list. And I was just talking to some of my students in another class yesterday about writing a list poem, and about how amazing that form is because it can contain so much. But it wasn't until Nathan called that it also made me think about how the list can contain like multiple versions of yourself. So like you think you're making a list of everything that happened to you in the way that I think Invasion of the Body Snatchers is still kind of a list poem.
At the end of the books.
But it's like you get to be multiple versions of yourself too.
Well, you know what's interesting? We've been in my family for our fellow family members making birthday lists so that they'll know what we want. And the birthday lists have morphed into these funny little poems, including a lot of things that there is no way anybody would ever get for you.
Such
So
as.
it's an interesting form, and you might want to try it.
I will try.
But I want to ask you a question. What do you do when you co-teach? Because Phil and I have to co-teach at Naropa, and I have no idea what. Our class is going to be about insult poems.
Insult
But
poems.
what?
Awesome.
How would we co-teach?
All right, Julia Block.
Well, the best piece of
In
advice
1 minute or
I
less.
have for co-teaching is not to do too much planning beforehand.
Oh, really?
And let yourself do the co-teaching
But what
in
do
the
you
room
do?
with your students. Because
Okay.
So I've co-taught a few classes, and then I'm co-teaching with Al here. And we have our own styles and we have our own approaches, but we let it happen. We let it unfold in the room with the students. No.
Okay. Well, that's good.
A young professor, and I overprepared. An older colleague said to me, "Why are you doing that? You've been," remember exactly how he said this, "you've been preparing all your life." And he was right. Nathan, are you still there?
Oh, yes, yes.
We're going to say goodbye so someone else can call, but thank you.
Yep.
We were all very moved by that. And you have one more thing you want to say to Bernadette?
Oh, I just wanted to say again, thank you so much. You have brought more to my life than you can ever imagine. And
I'm so happy.
All of you, and have a wonderful and blessed day.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, that's great. 215-573-9752. And in a minute or two, Maurice and Molly, I'm going to ask each of you if you have a question or comment that you want to pose to Bernadette. I'll give you some time to think of it. I have a portable mic to go to Lainey Brown. And Lainey Brown is here. And for ModPo people, you're going to encounter Lainey Brown in Chapter 9.3 in ModPo Plus. We have some of her daily sonnets there. And I'm going to ask her a question if we can get the portable mic to her. We're fooling around with we're switching out the battery. Lily, do you mind unhooking yours and giving it to Lainey? Because I'm kind of on a roll about Lainey here. Thanks. You just have to pull it out. No, just pull the whole thing out. No. All right, never mind. We got it. All right. Hi,
Hello.
Lainey. How are you?
Hi, everyone.
I know you have so many things that you wanted to say to Bernadette in public, because you've said many things not in public, but I want to lead in with a question. So, speaking of daily sonnets, I mean, when we talked about daily sonnets, and when we, not you in the room, for Poem Talk talked about daily sonnets, we kept thinking about Bernadette Mayer in the back of them, partly because you felt empowered to write the sonnet you were capable of writing in any given day filled with kids and other commitments, and you did it. Can you talk about the influence that she's had on you before saying anything else you want?
This is embarrassing.
This is your life.
Oh, okay.
Bernadette's work just made so much possible for me. Her generative approach and her experiments and her sonnets, and just the way that you reinvent form, like the sonnets and then the letters. And so 2 of my books have followed the
One book of
forms
letters
your
and
books.
another of sonnets. What has she done to the sonnet?
She's unleashed it.
I didn't do it.
She didn't do it.
Say more. What has she done to the sonnet? Because we think of the sonnet as a form of traditional constraint.
It's very hard to write love poems that are not cliche or boring or just relevant. And I feel like Bernadette's the master of the love poem in every form. And, the sonnet is traditional form for love poem. And they're just so playful and irreverent, and they go all over the place, and they contain every register you could imagine. And I love the mix of that, like the idea of a love poem that could be a list, or it could be insults, or, it could be anything. So it's just very liberating.
Would you hold on to the mic, because I have a feeling we're going to come back to you in a minute. Julia, what do we have that's interesting either in the Twitter feed or in the forum?
Well, there's a question from Ray in the discussion forum.
Ray Maxwell?
No, not Ray Maxwell. R-A-E.
R-A-E, yes. Hi, Ray.
And Ray has a couple of different questions. One, what advice do you have for young women poets today? That's a really big question. And number two, what are your thoughts about the collaboration of image and poetry in the landscape of shifting technology? So how has technology changed, I think, how we combine images with poetry? So you've done a lot of work in visual culture and poetry, and she's wondering if you have any interest in shifting landscape of technology.
I don't understand the question.
How about the first one? What was the first one?
What advice do you have for young women poets today?
Didn't I already do that?
What got you interested in doing visual art and poetry at the same time?
Because I like to do both things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the way you think kind of involves that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's reflective of your thought, the way you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Any other tweets that we want to pass along? Ray Maxwell reminds us that Julia Block led a bunch of them in a group reading Midwinter Day last December, and Ray says it was life-changing. What else do you have?
Yeah, we have another comment on Midwinter Day.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second to
Wow.
pull it up. From Thomas Morgan.
Thomas Morgan from Ohio.
And he wrote, welcome to ModPo, Bernadette. Some of my favorite lines of poetry are the final 3 lines of Song of Myself. However, there's no doubt about these also favorite lines. Then to end, I guess, with love, a method to this winter season. Now I've said this love, it's all I can remember.
You're quoting the end of the poem.
Of Midwinter Day, the 22nd of December. And he writes, 35 years after they were written, your words finally reached me, touched me, and once again made me whole. Thank you for sharing you with us and for being with us today.
Oh, that's so nice.
Very nice. So, Lily, we have a phone caller, and then Amaris and Molly, I'm going to turn to you. Lily, who's on the phone?
It's Mandana, one of our community TAs, calling from New York.
All right. Hi, Mandana.
Hey, Al.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Do you want to ask Bernadette a question?
Sure.
She can hear you.
Sure. First of all, I think I'm the biggest masochist in the entire course because I'm following Nathan.
Following Nathan, yes.
Yes, and I'd like everyone to drop their thresholds of expectations accordingly. I'm a huge, huge fan of Ms. Meyer, and one benefit of telling all of you over the phone is that I'm not collapsing as I say it. One of your poems that we've been reading this week is The Tragic Condition of the Statue of Liberty, which I find as expansive and full of meaning as the object itself. I love it. I was one of those kids in my Brooklyn public school who was taking their en masse before there was an Ellis Island to trudge up those narrow, endless stairs like a Hitchcock movie. I'm assuming that it was written or conceived around the time of the statue's 100th anniversary, which would make it particularly timely. I remember what life was like in New York, you know, that huge dichotomy between the have-a-lots and the have-not-so-muches, and that crash that was coming. And your phenomenal last line, I can't help but think that both you and Ms. Lazarus offered your poetry as tribute, both of which survive untarnished, I might add, in hope, because despite the sad of your observations, the external state of the statue, and worse, I'd say the core of disrepair of what it represents, I felt you had hope. But if I may, near that fantastic end, you write about the sadness you felt that the statue was in such disrepair, literally and figuratively, in terms of what she stands for. Were you also perhaps touching on iconography in general, how these symbols that we revere and that we imbue with so much meaning offer perhaps, I don't know, unattainable dreams that humanity, which is utterly flawed, can't fulfill?
I thought it was kind of interesting. There was an paper about how the Statue of Liberty was falling apart. That was the inspiration for this poem. And I thought it was appropriate that New York City can afford to repair it.
Is there, Mandana is reading some hope at the end. Is there any hope at the end?
Hope. I don't know.
But you're sad and surprised, and then this is the most generous contribution I can afford. Either that's non-ironic, like, yeah, I'm doing this poem, that's the best I can do, I hope things get better, or you're being sassy and sarcastic.
Probably sassy and sarcastic. Because I don't really feel very strongly about the Statue of Liberty as a monument.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really like monuments in general. My daughter is working on repair of this obelisk in Central Park, and I think it's hilarious. She was also working on the refurbishing of the statue of General Sherman, and one of the photographers who came dropped his camera down the leg. I mean, that kind of thing is more interesting to me than the monuments themselves.
Mandana, thank you for calling.
Thank you, Al.
And thanks for sitting in last week, coming to Philly to be part of that. You got rave reviews.
Oh, well, thank Julia for all of it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.
I'm Maurice Kachansky. Do you have a comment or question for Bernadette Mayer?
I do. Hi, Bernadette.
Hello.
Your assignment to me immediately, of course, your writing experiments. And like glancing through them, I just remembered that one of them seems very characteristic of a lot of New York poets that we had to read for this week. Frank O'Hara's
Poets. Maurice, what you want to do is speak very slowly and clearly because your sound is a little blurby.
Okay. So taking one for an example, you write, structure a poem or prose writing according to streets, miles, walks, and drives. That recalled for me Frank O'Hara's Step from Them and John Ashbery's Just Walking Around. And I was wondering how you came up with these. Were these experiments that you deployed in your own writing, and what was the sort of idea you were getting at in coming up with these experiments? Was it...
Great question. Thank you.
That particular one I did with my workshop a lot, and we would walk around and write poems or take notes and then come back to the workshop room and write the poem. But I did get this great idea from Bill Kushner. If you want to write a sonnet, you just walk 14 blocks and you write one line for each block. It's so easy.
And you get exercise.
Yeah, and then you can write two if you go back.
Implicit in Maurice's question, Bernadette, was I heard O'Hara and Ashbery. She was picking out themes from their poems, but I guess this is a good occasion to ask you, what is your aesthetic, personal, otherwise connection to that so-called first generation of New York school poets? Do you get a lot from them? Is it an ongoing influence, etc.?
Yeah. I like to read their poems, and I feel honored that I grew up in that world where, you know, New York City, where there were so many poets around at that time.
So you did grow up in that world. Before we went on the air, you said that you
I didn't grow up there. I grew up
as a poet.
Part of Brooklyn. Yeah.
And you said before we came into the room that you were a very young poet. You went to Ashbery, maybe one of his first readings.
Yes.
And he did his usual Ashbery thing of being very flat and monotonal. And it empowered you.
Yeah, I loved it. Because, you know, I was used to poets trying to make a connection with the audience or actually looking at them. And I saw John do this, and I thought, wow, if he can do it, I can do it too. But I'll tell you, should I tell my John Ashbery story?
Yes, please. John and David are watching, so no, I'm kidding. They're not.
Well, he's heard this before.
Oh, okay.
It makes him laugh. I once wrote a blurb and signed it John Ashbery, and John saw it, and it did make him laugh.
Was it in the Ashbery prose mode?
Not at all. It said, Bernadette Mayer is the best writer in the country, and I'm giving her all my money when I die. But here's my great John Ashbery story. When I was a young person, I was going to a buffet dinner in New York City, and getting some food, and I feel somebody pinch my ass. And I turn around, it's John Ashbery, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were a boy." Isn't that a great story?
That is a great story. I don't want to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. Let's go to Molly O'Neill, who liked that last story, I can tell. Molly, do you have a question or comment for Bernadette?
I do. Hi, Bernadette. I really loved Nathan's discussion of memory as being collective, and I'm looking at the tragic condition of the Statue of Liberty, and it's a collaboration with Emma Lazarus. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about poetry and the writing of poetry as collective and collaboration and how that works.
Great question.
Yeah. Answer, yes.
Do you like to do it, and what does it get? What does it do for you to collaborate rather than write by yourself?
Much more interesting to have two brains,
right,
or more working on a poem.
What's your favorite collaboration?
The one I've done with Phil that we're going to read tonight about the thrift shop blues.
So you are going to read that tonight.
Yeah.
You're going to read it, the two of you together?
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And I wrote a great one with my daughter Marie and Phil called Hibernation Collaboration. I love all collaborations. Unfortunately, I can't handwrite. So when Jack Collum, we sit around a table and he says, let's write a collaboration, and starts passing the paper around.
Mm.
And, you know, it kind of cramps your style to have to dictate your line.
Yeah.
Too.
You dictate. You're not typing with one finger or anything like that?
I'm typing at home.
Yeah.
But when we're collaborating, sitting around a table, there's no typewriter.
Right. Molly, thanks for the question. So 215-573-9752. Julia has some interesting stuff going on in the forums, and then I want to ask Erica to say something or ask something, and we'll go back to Lainey.
There's another question from Ray. She was wondering if you could say more about insult poems. So you're going to be teaching a class on insult poems. What is that going to look like?
Ray, I hope you'll sign up for that class.
A grade form based on, in the interim, it became a stoop, a game you played on the stoop in Harlem. You would just hurl insults at
like
the other.
Dozens?
Yeah, like your mother wears army boots.
Right.
I'm keeping it clean.
Yeah, your mother wears army boots is almost like a hilarious, benign version of that, yes.
But an ancient form, insult poems, and a form I love to write in. I mean, it's really freeing to, when you're really mad at somebody, to totally hurl insults at them and write them down. It's great how permanent they become. Catullus wrote some great insult poems, and I don't know, it's a neglected form, I think.
Great, thanks. Erica, what do you have? What's on your mind?
I would be curious to know more about your relationship to form in a more general sense, and I'm thinking particularly about your list of experiments, which your work's been hugely important to me in a lot of the ways that I think Lainey mentioned, by giving me as a young female poet the freedom to feel like I could engage with constraints and with form and with kind of thinking through procedural poetics in a different sort of way. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
Yeah.
But I would be really curious to hear about, how you came to generate that list and how that list speaks to, or the relationship between that and your own practice as a writer.
Okay. That list comes from the experiments that I did with my workshop in 1970-ish.
Right.
And that's how the list originated. And I've done all those experiments myself, obviously, and a few that aren't on the list. And that's what, it keeps me from getting bored.
Right.
Don't you hate the idea that a poet, goes to work and works for 8 hours? I mean, this is insane. So you can make your own experiments list. I mean, I'm sure you have already.
I mean, it's interesting because a student came in to meet with me the other day, and we were talking about creative writing, which I don't usually teach. And he was asking me for advice, and I printed out the list of experiments because he was like, I really, I've been writing fiction, but I really am interested in poetry, but it's scary. And I was like, look at this.
Yeah.
And it was a moment where he was just like, wow.
Well, I think a lot of people have that idea that you write something that you dream up, and really there's a lot else to do. I mean, you can do that, but you don't. I mean, when you're in your spare time, when you're not dreaming up things, you can. There are so many other things to do. So I always thought that was insane. There used to be a psychiatrist in New York City who did poetry therapy for people who had writer's block.
Wow.
Can you don't the purpose of the experiments list is that you don't ever you're never able to have writer's block.
Yeah, I think that's something that was hugely important to me that I've learned from your work is that, I feel like you can't have writer's block.
Yeah, well,
and it's
there's no
amazing.
way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a totally lack of thought to have writer's block. Can you just try? I should put that on the experiments list. Try and have writer's block.
Lily, who do we have on the phone?
This is Maria calling from Georgia, and she has a question.
Okay, let's put her on. Hello, Maria.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I am the same Maria from the introduction, the one with the 4-year-old children.
Oh, you're Maria, whose introduction I read at the beginning. This is great. So everybody I read calls us. Could you make sure you're on the computer and just listen to us on the phone? Okay, so you can see Bernadette on your computer and say hello and say whatever you would like to say.
Okay, this is really exciting. I guess I'd like to ask you a question or just make a general observation or comment as a mother who I'm writing poetry in my daily life. It's becoming a part of my routine and what I do. I'm an unschooled poet. I don't have any formal training.
And one of your kids is quite young, like 15 months or something.
Yes. I have a baby and a preschooler. So I have a lot of time and I have no time. So sometimes when I'm writing poetry, I find that I start asking myself, why am I doing this? What does this matter? This poem feels, worthless on the page. What am I going to do with this thing? And after a while, I start to try to see it as something that is it's like air, it's worthless, it doesn't have any value, but at the same time it feels like this really vital thing that has, it's priceless. And so so Bernadette, as you have spent your life as a poet, can you speak at all to the sense that that poetry in a way almost transcends materialism, that it is this vital, life-giving thing? I don't know if this is an experience of all poets and readers of poetry, because like when I read your poem yesterday, I've been sitting, but when I read it yesterday, it was almost like this life-giving thing. It was this window into a moment that I could identify with, but I could also see it through these new eyes, and so it was like an awakening. And I don't know, It's kind of a general observation and question, but about the immateriality of poetry, that it has no value, but it is priceless. So I don't know.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay.
Bernadette, any response to what Maria is saying?
Could you phrase it again for me?
Okay.
Well, you want to ask the question about immateriality because you were also most generally talking about your own experience as
yes.
a mom of young kids and a poet, both at once.
Yes. Yes. So finding, how do you sort of, or how do you transcend this feeling of doing something that isn't, it's something that is that has just that it's not completely of importance in society, but it's important to everything. I don't know. It's so how I don't know. I guess
what do you feel you are striving to transcend? Are you saying the particular situation that constrains you at home in your life? Is that what you're hoping poetry will do?
I guess, yes.
Okay.
That and the sense of doing something that that essentially has very new to material culture.
Right.
Yes.
You feel undervalued.
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeking in poetry some way to restore value to what you do?
Yes. And that poetry in and of itself is this valueless thing, but it's beyond that too.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Bernadette? Poetry is not remunerative. There's not a ton of money in it, but it brings some value to Maria's existence.
Thank you.
I think you should have ask a friend to take you out to dinner, and then instruct him or her to say, I am taking you out to dinner because you're a poet.
That's great. Thank you. That's
Maria,
wonderful.
you had such a strong response to that poem.
I did.
And I think that, and you wrote about that in the forums in ModPo, and then that in itself is extremely powerful that you did that. Right?
It is, and yes, and thank you, Al, and everybody for creating such a wonderful opportunity that anybody can access.
It's a pleasure, Maria, and we're glad you're part of it. And we hope that you'll rent a car or get on a plane or something, or crawl to Philadelphia for maybe the final webcast and join us here. We'd love to meet you.
I'll try.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for calling. All right, Lainey, do you want to pick up the mic and say what's on your mind? And I'll just say that the next caller will receive we will mail you a copy of John Ashbery's first 5 books of poetry called The Mooring of Starting Out. We will mail that to you, and so this is an incentive to call. So, Lainey, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking about what the caller was talking about, because these are questions that I've had. It's very hard to paraphrase. I could hear her struggling trying to paraphrase, but I think a few things that really helped me in Bernadette's work, and then I tried to do in my own work, were to think about whatever seems like the impediment or the enclosure or the problem, and that becomes the material. And then instead of becoming a problem, it becomes your writing. And then to this question about, poetry is useful or poetry is useless. I mean, I think what makes it priceless, what a lot of poets have written on this, Norman Fisher comes to mind particularly in the essay in the beginning or the end of his book, Success, which is all double sonnets, which he told me he wrote this book. I said, why is it called Success? You're a Zen priest. Because somebody gave him a day book that said success on the cover, and he used it, and the poems have 28 lines because that's how many lines there were. So you're kind of...
How many lines on the page?
Right. So in double sonnets, so using the constraints, using motherhood or using unemployment or using devastation or heartbreak, because I feel like Bernadette can do that in her work. And then the other thing is, what is objective reality? This is a conversation that we've had in letters recently, and you have to write the reality in. So if the reality you're experiencing is that poetry isn't valued, then you have to write a different reality. That's our job, right? But the question I want to ask you, Bernadette, is,
yes.
Do you remember, because I don't think I know this story, what was your first encounter with poetry ever? Like the first poem you ever loved and the first poem you ever wrote. What was the circumstances? What do you remember? How old were you? Where were you?
Yeah. I don't remember the first poem I ever read. But an early poem we were reciting this morning for Phil's mother is the Carl Sandburg poem. The fog comes in on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city and then moves on. But that's much later. I'm sure the first poems I ever encountered were nursery rhymes. Yeah, but I mean, do you count those?
Were they read to you?
I don't remember. I don't remember. But I began keeping journals when I was first writing, where I didn't write in poem form at all, but I kept these journals because I needed to write something down, and so it was I had invented poetry. Because, it's funny, right? It's kind of a ballsy thing to say, because I looked at these journals and they were full of these odd, meaningless words that sounded interesting. And it took me years to figure out that that's what poetry was. So I don't know where I got the idea from. It's an ancestral memory.
Poetry is an ancestral memory. Like, she's writing that down.
Yeah.
I am haunted by the reading, the performance voice of Ted Berrigan. It just it's in my head. I assume you heard Berrigan
many
read
times.
A lot. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about the quality of that voice, see if you can shed any light on it, because it's casual. Sometimes it's almost as if I'm reading. The fact that you're in the room with me doesn't really matter that much, but I'm just reading. Sometimes it's very urgent. And anyway, I thought I wanted to play just a couple of seconds of Berrigan and ask you to say something about that voice. Okay, Chris, are we ready for this?
3 pages. It's for Jack Collum. 10 things I do every day: play poker, drink beer, smoke pot, jack off, curse, by the waters of Manhattan, flower, positive and negative, go home, read, lunch, poems, hunker down, changes. Life goes by quite merrily, blue, no help wanted, hunting for the whale, and if the weather plays me fair, I'm happy every day. The white that drives clear, the heart attack, the Congressional Medal of Honor, a house in the country, not enough.
What did you hear in that voice? It brings back memories, I guess.
Yeah, about a million things. How should I be polite?
No, you don't have to like.
Later in his life, Ted took so much speed that he became this really angry person. So what I heard at first was Ted's voice, and that was my first.
Because he was, in this poem, he's talking about how his days are just what he wants them to be, and he's relaxed about it.
Right. Yeah.
What else did you hear? Because the Congressional Medal of Honor, which he most certainly didn't receive, and watching the paint dry and the heart attack, and it seems almost wistful and sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so different from the so-called first generation of the so-called New York school poets. We would never read. I mean, O'Hara read with tremendous upbeat energy. Ashbery reads with that monotone we were talking about. This is so different. It's a similar kind of poem as O'Hara. It's a list poem. It's an I do this, I do that poem.
Yeah.
But it's so different in its attitude tonally.
Yeah. Well, despite what you hear, I don't mean me, from hearing Ted read, his way of writing poetry had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he knew everything about writing poetry. I mean, a lot of his voice at this point in time was from this poet Ivor Winters.
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, it's very strange, isn't it?
Ivor Winters, not exactly the influence you would imagine.
Right.
Very conservative.
But I mean,
poet.
if you ever had a conversation with Ted, he would be telling you things that you didn't even know about writing poetry. Has nothing to do with his visual gestalt and his projection of himself in his poems.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's very fascinating.
Erica, you think a lot about these poets early and how they read. Do you want to say anything about what you heard in Berrigan's voice? What were you thinking when you were listening?
I find the way he reads to just be beautiful. Like there's a certain care with just how he enunciates the different words.
Yeah.
That I find to be so appealing.
Yeah.
And then I was also just thinking about reading styles and what you were saying before, Al, about the difference between somebody like Frank O'Hara or Ashbery and then the way that Berrigan reads. And then I was beginning to think about poets like Eileen Myles, who also has a very conversational sort of reading style where it feels like you get caught up in the rush of a long sentence.
Right, exactly.
And it's the same idea of, there's a certain kind of poetry that invites you to be in a conversation with it.
Great, thank you. Lily, we have someone on the phone who has just won an Ashbery book.
It's Amparo calling from Texas.
Amparo!
She called during one of our first webcasts, and she's very excited.
Oh, that's great. Can you get her address so we can mail this to her? Okay, let's hear from Amparo. Amparo? Amparo, can you hear me? Think we may have lost her?
Uh-oh.
See if she's still on.
Amparo? Oh. Amparo, are you there? Hello?
We may have lost her. She'll call back. We want to send you this book. So while we're waiting for Amparo to call, I'd like to give Eric the mic, who has a question or comment, and then, Bernadette, if you're okay with this, Julia and I would like you... There's Amparo. Why don't we just hold the phone here and just see if that's her. Sorry. It's not her. Okay. So what we're going to do after Eric's question is, if it's okay with you, we're going to ask you to read a poem from this book, and then Julia has a question or two about the poem. We'll just talk about it for a minute.
Poem?
This one. I think it's this one, right?
Okay.
Yeah, you jerk. You didn't call me up, the sonnet, right?
Oh,
okay.
everybody's favorite poem.
Everybody's favorite poem. Okay.
Shit.
All right. So.
Don't you hate that?
Well, we can do another one, but that we kind of like that one. Eric, do you have the mic?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So Bernadette, when you were talking about using journals and coming to poetry and it sort of emerging from the journals that you were writing, I thought of Walt Whitman, because he really did start the same way. He had no idea that he was going to turn these journals into poems.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he kind of discovered it through the language itself at certain moments. And he had many ideas of what initially what Song of Myself might be. So I do feel some kinship between you and Whitman. You're both extremely brave poets and bold. I wanted to...
this is great. Now I can tell people I'm related to Walt Whitman.
Do you like
aesthetically? Yes.
Do you like that?
Yeah.
I wanted to just ask you about the St. Mark's Poetry Project, which I think is a very important place for poetry. And a place that you've had a lot to do with helping to make what it is. So I think a lot of our students would be very interested to hear a little bit about the St. Mark's Poetry Project and your involvement with it.
St. Mark's Poetry Project, pretty great to have been involved with, but I'll tell you what's wrong with the St. Mark's Poetry Project. I don't know if it's still wrong. But when I was the director, the audience took poetry so seriously. You'd walk down the aisle, it was terrifying, to the podium. And everybody thought, when they stood in the back, that it was like a cliquish place. And I used to hang out at the door of the parish hall with Joe Brainerd, because he and I were both suffering so badly from social anxiety disorder that we didn't like to walk in there alone. So we would bolster each other up. I mean, it was a terrifying place. And when you read your poems there, you look at the sea of faces, nobody laughs. Even if I do my own laugh, like what I do now is I'm much less shy. I say something I think is funny, and nobody laughs. I say, ha 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 ha. See, it worked. But I mean, I couldn't do that then. So, but St. Mark's Poetry Project, a great presence. The guy who worked there, Steve Facey, was worked at the church as a kind of a general coordinator. Told me after the fire we had to have the walls replastered. So Steve and I are sitting there having a conversation, and he says, "It's great, isn't it? The plaster on these walls absorbs the poetry." And I thought, wow, what a great coworker I have.
And on the Whitman question, you're flattered by the comparison. You like Walt. Why do you like Walt?
Yes, I'm thrilled. I'm inspired.
Yeah.
I'd like to be exactly like Walt Whitman. There's a great statue of him, which you might someday see at Bear Mountain State Park, on a rock, which is inscribed with the Song of the Open Road. I mean, pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have that affirmation of Walt this far into our course, because we begin with Walt. Lily, who do we have on the phone? Is it Amparo?
No, this is Elizabeth, but Amparo, I think we got disconnected. I know we only have about 10 minutes left, but...
Yeah, we're not going to take another call after this. So what are we going to do about the book? Does this go to Amparo?
Yeah,
okay.
She was so excited.
Okay.
Okay, but this is Elizabeth calling from the Bay Area.
Okay. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hi, this is Al.
Oh, hi, Al.
How are you?
I'm great. I love your class.
Oh, great. That's great. Well, we're glad you're part of it. You're nearby, huh?
Well, I don't think Bay Area is nearby. Aren't you
You're in San
Philadelphia?
Francisco.
Yeah, where are you?
We're in Philadelphia.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I made a mistake. I think Lily said something like she's from the area.
I said the Bay Area.
Yeah, well, I misheard you. So,
well, no blaming it on me.
well, you have more of the day left than we do. That's fantastic. It's only 10 o'clock there. Anyway, so Bernadette is here. You're going to be the last caller of the day. So what do you have to say? What would you like to say to Bernadette?
Well, my question was really, I love all this experimental poetry, like the lists and like we've been studying in ModPo too. But like the list you guys just read from Berrigan, who was it?
Ted Berrigan.
Ted
Berrigan, right?
But my question is, don't we have to like be able to write regular poetry before we get to be experimental?
No.
Just like
absolutely not.
Really?
Elizabeth,
Because,
you're going to hear a strong answer from Bernadette, but please first turn down your computer sound.
Oh.
Because it's going to spin out of control very quickly. All right, so you were going to hear this, and I think we all would give this answer, but let's hear Bernadette's version of it.
Well, I just want like besides a no, because it's like you know, a pianist, an artist, they're always like a regular classical player before they start experimenting, right? You can't just be John Cage. I mean, it's the same thing like William Carlos Williams. I mean,
you could be a little John Cage.
Go around and collect everybody's refrigerator lists, right?
You're saying that the poem about stealing the plums was easy to write, that your 5-year-old could do it?
Well, no, I think the Ted Berrigan would be easier to write.
You think the Ted Berrigan poem about the 10 things he does that day is easy to write?
It's just like thinking of it. You just have to be the one to think of it. But the point is, he was writing poetry before that.
Yeah.
It's like turning the urinal upside down, right? I mean,
the urinal?
Nobody's going to pay any attention until you're not.
Turning the urinal upside down, calling it fountain. Okay, so before we're going to get a lot of answers to this question.
Okay.
Okay, you've asked it clearly. I'm so glad that you love the class because
I really do.
Yeah, because you're saying these things. You're somewhat of a dissenter from where the class goes, but that's cool. That's great.
Is your
no, I'm with you guys on it too, but
it's mostly on avant-garde experimental poetry.
But, I mean, is it on the computer?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. So here's some answers. First Bernadette, then Lainey, and we'll go on. You want to take another shot at answering? First, you said no.
Yes.
Do you want to say anything more?
I still say no.
Okay.
No. Well, I've done all your work for you. You have to. You can use my experiments list and never have to write that crappy 19th century high school poetry, which teach you nothing.
Well, that's my question, I guess. That's my big question. Does it teach you anything so you can go on and write the kind of poetry you're writing?
No, and if you want to, it doesn't teach you anything, but if you want to learn about meter and rhyme, you can study it on your own and do what you want to do with it. That's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Get yourself a rhyming dictionary, study, get a good meter book.
No, that doesn't interest me at all.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought it did.
No, what I'm just saying that in order to even recognize that, say, a refrigerator list is something worth putting on a page and publishing, to even see that, it's almost as if you have to have written poetry for the last 10 years or something.
Well, you could sit around and wait to see if it glows. And then you'd be sure.
Elizabeth, we're since we have to wrap up soon, I'm going to let Lainey Brown answer your question. But will you? So all you have to do is, if you hang up and then listen to the answer on your cookout, and thank you for callers and have fun in San Francisco. By the way, I want to, Molly, are we able to announce this, Molly? Are we able to announce you're really going to do this, Molly?
Yes, I just got the confirmation email from Andrew.
Okay, so Molly O'Neill is flying from Los Angeles to San Francisco for a meetup on November 6th. So Elizabeth, would you be willing to come out in the early evening on November 6th to meet Molly and hang out and do some ModPo stuff?
Certainly.
Oh, great. So we're going to announce that.
I won't be televised, will I? I mean,
No, just Molly. Molly is totally easy to be with, and she's not intimidating. Super smart, though. Watch out.
From the class, right?
No, it's going to be fun.
Okay, great.
So, yeah, great. Thanks for calling, Elizabeth. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to wrap up. What we were hoping you would do is read that really famous poem.
Oh.
Do you mind?
Is it famous?
Yeah, it's really famous.
Oh,
in this building, it's really famous. Maybe Julia has a question about it that we can ask you, and then basically I'm going to go around and thank people, and we'll wrap up. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Should I begin?
Yeah.
Sonnet. You jerk, you didn't call me up. I haven't seen you in so long, you probably have a fucking tan. Tail would be good. And besides that, instead of making love tonight, you're drinking your parents to the airport. I'm through with you bourgeois boys. All you ever do is go back to ancestral comforts only money can get. Even Catullus was rich, but nowadays you guys settle for a couch by a soporific color cable TV set instead of any arc of love. No wonder the GIG team blows it every other time. Wake up! It's the middle of the night. You can either make love or die at the hands of the Cobra Commander. To make love, turn to page 121. To die, turn to page 172.
And that poem is called? Sonnet. Perfect response to Elizabeth. Okay, Julie, do you have a question for Bernadette about that poem?
So, Bernadette, I always wonder, it's called a sonnet, but it has 2 extra lines.
16 lines.
How do we get away with that?
Well, you know, in the Romantic era, sonnets could be the sonnet form has gone through, but I want to say before that I have a new feeling about it, is that it's a stupid form.
Even though you just published a new book of sonnets.
Yeah, well, that's an old book republished.
Okay.
With new sonnets added. The reason is that the sonnet form makes you feel like you can reach a conclusion, and you really can't. It's all false.
Do you think the sonnet is a stupid form, but it's also a form that kind of makes us stupid because it makes us believe that you can reach this conclusion?
Yeah, it's a philosophical problem.
Yeah.
It's not a poetry problem.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah, I love that
I
idea.
do.
Well, thank you. We're going to say thanks all the way around. I'm Maurice Kachansky. Thank you for joining us from Massachusetts. Good to see you. Molly O'Neill, we'll put that announcement about your San Francisco meetup. Looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us. Yep. Chris and Zach, thank you for doing the tech today. Let's give a round of applause to these guys. It's amazing what they do. Lainey Brown and Eric, also Weinstein, for just being so great and asking great questions. Lily Applebaum, thank you for doing the phones. She's fantastic. Oh, you get an applause. That's great. And Erica Kaufman, you came crashing down here on Amtrak, and we're glad you were here, and we have a good day ahead of us. We're going to do a poem talk with Bernadette and Julia on a poem by James Schuyler later, and then you'll be here for the reading that Bernadette and Philip are going to be giving at 6 o'clock. That's 6 o'clock Philadelphia time. So if you can be in this room, please join us. If you want to watch by webcast, we hope you will. Julia Block, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was lots of fun. And Bernadette Mayer, thank you for coming. This was great. We had enjoyed this 4-ring circus. Was it fun?
Yeah, it was fun.
So, and thanks Nathan Walker for calling and reading that wonderful letter to Bernadette from Minnesota, and Elizabeth who called from San Francisco, and Maria from Atlanta, and others We're so glad that you came. And so we're going to sign off now. We'll see you at 6 p.m. and then again next week for a special live webcast where we'll have Bob Perlman here and Michelle Taransky, and we'll be talking about Virginians. So thank you all. Let's praise rather than what's the insult? The insult is the opposite. Let's do the opposite of insulting and praise Bernadette Mayer and Philip Good for coming today.
And now you can hurl insults at us.
You can hurl insights. We're gonna end the webcast and then you can hurl insights at us. Okay. Thank you and take care.